One of the other things we talked about was potentially wanting to like fade your image into the background. So let's just say we're gonna have, instead of a white background, a background that's a particular color. So using this image here, and again, remember that you can use the little eyeballs here to turn your layers on and off. Say we wanted to kind of fade this into a background that is closer in color to what you've got going on in here, and then maybe make it look like, instead of having a hard edge, it's kind of feathered and fading off into the background. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to grab a color for this background that's from the actual photograph, so we know it's going to match and look good when it fades in. So I'm going to use my eyedropper tool for that. So you can use that either by hitting I on your keyboard, or you can just grab this guy here, the eyedropper tool. I'm going to grab one of these dark colors. As you can see, it's not quite black. It's a very dark gray. Dark blue here, you can see. Click OK. Now that automatically sets that as your foreground color. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab my paint bucket, and I'm going to want to drop that in. Now again, just to remind you, you don't want to just drop this in on any random layer willy-nilly, because that's going to make it hard for you to then have it blend. And as you can see, I popped it into this layer right here, which has got a blending mode on it, so it doesn't look right. So I'm going to hit undo. So I'm going to actually make this my background. And to make that background layer, instead of it being white, I'm going to have it be this color. So I'm going to drop that on that background. Now, as you can see, I'm probably going to want to make some changes to some of my text and some other things as a result of this, because it now doesn't really work, the black on this kind of dark gray blue. But for the moment, I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to be focusing on my images here and having them blend in. So one of your options inside your marquee tool is you can have a hard edge, which is by default what it will be, or you can set the feather. So I want to show you what happens if you feather the edge here. I'm going to just try 50 pixels just to see what ends up happening. So I'm going to again do what I just did. I want to grab the exact size of our top image here. And when I let go, you notice that the edge is rounded here. I'm going to zoom in. Again, it's Command plus, or you can use the zoom in tool. And you can see that there's this round edge that's kind of coming into the image a little bit. So remembering that this is what's selected is what's inside, I actually want to go ahead and I'm going to select the inverse, because what I want to do is kind of remove this hard edge and kind of blend it a little bit. So I'm going to go up to my select and I'm going to hit inverse. And again, you see that now it's changed and this isn't selected, but this edge is. So just to show you what this has done, I'm going to hit delete. And you see how this has kind of come in a little bit. Now I'm going to take away the underneath image so you can see, but you see that the edge is blurred. Now, the other thing you'll notice is that maybe I want to come in a little bit more at the top and bottom here, because you can see it's a little bit, but not all that much. So I'm gonna edit undo and edit undo again, kind of keep backing out, and you can see what happens when I redo and I undo. You can see the difference. And in fact, I'm just gonna can see for just looking at that layer what it's done. So one thing I've noticed is 50 pixels is maybe not enough. And two, I want it to actually come into the image a bit more. So I'm going to do 100 pixels. A lot of this is trial and error. And I'm going to bring it in a little bit more so that I'm in my image a bit. And again, I want to select the inverse. So again, go up to select inverse, or shift select I. Now, instead of just deleting, I want to have a little bit more control, because you notice that it fades the edge here as well, and I maybe don't want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and grab my eraser tool. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set, not just, I can set the size of my eraser, make it big maybe, but I can also set the hardness of my brush. Now, even if I have a very hard brush, because the feather is set, you notice that it's kind of fading and I'm not getting 100% of piece. And see, I can go down pretty far here. So I don't really want to do that. I'm going to undo. So what happens if I maybe set the hardness down all the way? You'll notice that it looks a little bit smaller on my brush. And I'm going to go in and erase down and see. Again, I can only go down so far because that's how far my 100 pixels is. And you notice it's definitely more noticeable in the light areas than in the dark. So I'm going to go in and do this again, because again, because it's feathered, I'm not getting kind of like all of it. So you can see, go in and get this a little bit more. And you can see I'm starting to lose that hard edge. It's starting to kind of blur into the background a little bit. And I may want to play with this corner a little bit more, but I'm starting to get the idea. You can see down the bottom, now just to show you the difference, if I had just hit delete, that's what it looks like. If I maybe did that, and then I can kind of bring my eraser into this edge a little bit. You see it's not deleting all of it because it's kind of allowing that space for the feathering. So it's not a hard edge that you would get. It's kind of allowing me to blur it into this background. And now if I bring in that other layer below, remember that you're working on whatever layer you have selected, I can go in and do the same thing here. Take this guy out of it and see again. I'm just going to hit delete. You can see it's pulling that out. I'm going to kind of blur this. So it's looking like it's kind of fading into this background instead of having a very hard edge. And with the two images layered on top of each other as well, it makes it a little bit easier, like there's a little bit of room for play. So where that looked very strange, that very bright white here, when it's got the other layer behind it, it looks a little bit more natural. So when I'm done, I'm going to use my select tool, select anywhere else. So now when I zoom out, see it kind of fades in. Now I think I actually want a background that's a little bit darker, because when I see it big, I can kind of see, not so happy about that. So I'm going to go ahead and click, and I can just select my new color. I just want to bring it down a little bit, make it a little bit darker, bring that value down. And then want to try to paint bucket that in, see if I like that a little bit more. Yeah, I think that's a little bit closer. And so you can see how it kind of fades into the background in a way that it didn't previously. Again, you could kind of play with what color you wanted it to be. Maybe you want it lighter, but you want that kind of brighter blue that it had. And then again, you can go in and you can play with your kind of erasing and see about how you want it to kind of sit. And see, this is what happens when you don't remember what layer you're on, how that sits on top of it. So like here, I feel like it's actually a little bit too strong here. Now, this is what happens when I don't have the feathering set. You see how it kind of took the whole thing at 100%. The other thing that I can change is how much I erase. So maybe I only want to erase 50% of the opacity. So that's a little bit closer to what was happening when I was feathering it. So you can see there's different ways of kind of approaching this problem. But they all kind of get at having the edge here be blurry and kind of feather off into the distance. So that might be something you want to use when you are working with your image. And again, you can see how choosing a different color for the background can really affect the feel of the piece. And this would be if you chose black. So I hope that gives you some ideas of how you can kind of play with your background to change the look of the piece.